All right. Good morning. Wow, there's nobody on this morning. There we go. There's a couple folks. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a fantastic weekend. And happy, if you're a football fan, happy Super Bowl weekend, I guess. I don't particularly. I actually stopped watching football quite a while ago, except for I watch a lot of college football. But so I guess I'll. I have a funny story actually. So I was out. I was working on a property yesterday that we bought a while back, and this guy walked up to me and one of the neighbors, and he was actually we just had a roof put on it, and he was complimenting us on the roof, which I didn't put a roof on it, somebody else did, but I guess he was appreciative because we're helping to improve the neighborhood there, and he yells across. It was in a little cul-de-sac. He yells across the cul-de-sac and he says, "Hey, do you like Bud Light?" And I don't particularly drink beer, but my partner and I had just got done talking. I mean, it was pretty warm. It's February here in Missouri, and it's surprisingly warm. And we were doing just a lot of heavy lifting type stuff, and we were just talking about how a good cold beer would taste. And so the guy yells across, "Hey, do you like Bud Light?" And even if I was a big beer drinker, I wouldn't drink Bud Light, but it was free, and the guy gave us a whole case of Bud Light. Apparently, he works at the brewery here in St. Louis, so it worked out. Hey, good morning, Marcella, Mr. Winkleman. How you doing, man? Let me turn this phone off here so we're not getting constantly blown up. Okay, Scott, I'm actually glad that you joined because you had a question in our community, and your question was related to a property that you're going to be. I don't know if you're buying it right now or if you've made an offer, but your question was about buying on a wrap. So we're going to expand that a little bit this morning and talk again a little bit about as it relates to if we were the seller. So I know that you're buying a property, but it's kind of the same process. So we was kind of what I want to do is just back up a little bit and talk about this morning about particularly a seller finance exit strategy. So Scott, you would apply this to your seller, almost the same as if you're the seller and you're selling on a wrap. So this would definitely apply to you. So we have a few different ways that we like to dispo properties, and obviously everybody knows about rentals is probably the most common dispo strategy for buy and hold. A lot of you do lease with the option to buy. I did that for quite a while, and ultimately got out of that business. It was kind of early on. It was just, I won't say that it was an experiment, but I thought that was the way that I really wanted to go and take my business. But as it turned out, I ended up ultimately being a landlord, and I just hate landlording. I mean, even if I have property management in place, there's something about it I just do not like. It can be a stressful job. So we have opted in my business. We've opted for one, unless it's like a big multifamily or something like that. Like we own an apartment complex and a couple of multifamily properties. Those obviously, unless I'm selling those on seller financing to another landlord, ultimately, I have to be a landlord in those cases. But if they're single family properties, I am 99% of the time, I'm going to try and seller finance those properties. If you're particularly, this is our mindset, but if we're in an area that's a really good area, AB area, we will still contemplate renting those properties. But like I said, 99% of the time they're going to be seller financed. So let's look at the ways. Hey, there's Miguel. How you doing, Miguel? Let me throw the chat overlay up here. If you guys have any comments or questions, before we really get started here, I think I am probably going to be moving this call to some other time. I'd love to have some suggestions from all of you about when you would like to see this call happen. Um, Sunday mornings, I do it Sunday mornings because it's super convenient for me. But as this weather changes and as we're coming up on spring and everything, it's not going to be it's not going to be near as convenient for me. So I am willing to take suggestions on maybe a better time that this call should happen. I like this one too because I like doing it on Sunday mornings because I consider Sundays to be the beginning of my work week. That's when I start. So I want to start my work week off right. And, by getting information out there and getting the juices flowing about my business, it does help me to get in the right mindset. So, but I think, let's see here. Yeah, Jonathan says, thinks the time is excellent. The problem is that sometimes it starts late and people think that it's not happening. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to be honest with you, Jonathan. A lot of these lives that I do are really very ad hoc, and quite honestly, I am not sure that I can that I can come up with subjects to talk about. I mean, it takes me a little while to get them together for the 9 o'clock, for this time, but actually, and you're on the East Coast, so you're a little bit later. It's 10 o'clock where you are, but yeah, I get that. So if you've got a better time that you think that we should do this, I'd be happy to entertain it for sure. So we may even try and reformat this at some point and make this a little more interactive. And by that I mean like actually having folks on a call, like we actually do a call, not just me up here running my mouth. So that's what I'm trying to do, John. Yeah, I actually do that. So a lot of this stuff is really curated. So like today's topic, it's curated by you folks. And this one in particular this morning started off, Mr. Scott Winkleman's on the call. Scott's a student, and he had a question about seller financing. He's actually buying a property on seller financing. And it's going to be, I'm not sure if you've got that under contract or not, Scott, but the idea is he's going to buy that with a mortgage wrap. And so I thought what I would do, like I said, is we would take a look at your different options when you're seller financing, or good to know, Marcella. We'll take a look at different options. It doesn't matter whether you're buying or you're selling. So Scott, like I said, I want you to take this and kind of apply it to your situation, and kind of act as if this is a way that you can tell your seller. That's really what I want you to get out of it. This is a way that you can tell your seller on how this actually is going to work. So that is the goal. All right, folks, if you are ready, let's jump into this thing. And I've got my bullet points pulled up here in front of me. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat section there, and or comments, whatever you've got. So, all right, let's kick it off. Seller financing. We have some of this is going to be a repeat, by the way, but there is a little bit, probably some new information I don't think we've ever had in any of these chats. So, but seller financing for us has just been a total game changer, just because of what I told you before. We really like the idea of a headache-free lifestyle, and so the most headache-free lifestyle possible. And for us, that's seller financing. So how do we do that? How are we going to convey title, or how are we going to convey ownership to our buyers? The very first way, and one of our favorite ways to do it, is to convey equitable title via contract for deed. Right? I think again, I know I've talked about this quite a bit, but let's just go over the major points on contract for deed. Contract for deed is exactly what it sounds like. It is a contract whereby if your buyer meets the terms of this contract, or if you're buying on contract for deed, if you meet the terms of that contract, the seller is going to convey legal title to you upon completion of that contract, or execution, 100% execution of that contract. So it conveys equitable title. It is one of the most least risky ways for us to sell. But if you are a buyer and you're buying on contract for deed, it's probably one of the most risky ways for you to buy. And it's just because you don't get legal title. But if you're a seller, we love it. We love it on the dispo side because obviously we don't have to give up legal ownership. We're just giving up a portion of the equity in the property. So that's one reason we really, really love it. It's one of the least risky ways for us to sell. And contract for deed is a private contract. We love privacy. We love anonymity, but privacy is a huge one. And it's private because a lot of states do not require recording of that contract or recording of any kind. Now, that's not true in all states. I know we border Illinois. Illinois, and I'm going to use Illinois in a couple of examples here, a couple of these explanations, just because we have students over there and we've done a lot of business over there. So now Illinois is a judicial state, so you do have to be careful when you're seller financing because if you have to if you meet any one of the following criteria that I'm about to go over, it could be disastrous for you. I would be happy to buy on seller financing in Illinois because that puts the risk, a little more risk on the seller. But I don't know that I would ever, or any judicial state for that matter, I probably would not sell on seller financing. So that might eliminate some of you that are on this call because you might be in a judicial state and you're selling on seller financing in a judicial state, and I just wouldn't recommend it. It's I know in Illinois they were taking a year and a half to foreclose on a property, and that's just that's way risky. All right, so but going back to the topic, a lot of states do not require any kind of recording or notice with the county assessor's office or the county recorder rather. So that is one of the great things, that you can be totally anonymous. It can be totally private. But like I said, some states are going to require either recording of the contract itself, or at minimum, they would require recording of what's called a memorandum of contract. It basically goes out, and this memorandum of contract is kind of it's not a cloud on title, but it's more of just letting the world know that there is somebody has equitable ownership in that deal. That's really all it's for. And some states do require that be done. I'm in Missouri. We do not require it. We can write contracts for deed all day long, and nobody else has to know about it. Now, your seller may ask you, I'm sorry, not your seller. Your buyer may ask you if they can record a memorandum of contract. And if that's the case, it is available for you to do. You can do that even in states like mine where it's not required. You can do that. So either way, I'm not really opposed to it. I just like the idea of, I guess I like the having the benefit of not having to do that. All right. The biggest problem we're going to face is that obviously if a buyer defaults, right? If they default on contract for deed, in many cases, with contract for deed, eviction is the eviction process, or the going through the courts to evict somebody is available to us with contract for deed. The only exception to that is if your buyer has built significant equity in that deal. And so again, I'm going to refer to Illinois. We just found this out. I actually read the code on this, and this is going to vary from state to state. But in Illinois, there's a 20% rule, right? So it's essentially if your buyer has built 20% more or equity, 20% or more of equity in that deal, you cannot go through the eviction process. You have to go through a foreclosure, a formal foreclosure. And so, and this is going to vary from state to state. So you're definitely going to have to check with your local or with your state on this rule. Maybe go out and speak with an attorney about it. But Illinois, I mean, it's the first time that I had read when this was brought up to us by one of our students. It's the first time I had read a real actual figure, and so it was really, really good to know. And just know that some states, if you sell on contract for deed, you're just automatically going to have to go and if your buyer defaults, you're going to have to foreclose. All right, so that is some homework for you to go out and figure that out. If seller financing is going to be if seller financing is going to be an option for you later on, I would definitely find that out. So that's a little bit on the contract for deed side. I don't know if anyone has any. Let's see here. Is there a way for a seller to buy a partial in the investment that they're selling to me? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can get super crazy with it. I prefer to keep things simple, but definitely. And I'm assuming you're by a partial, and because we're talking about contract for deed right now, Jonathan, are you talking about maybe partial ownership equity in that investment? I believe that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about a note, then absolutely they can buy partial for sure. I guess I'll wait for you to respond, but all right, let me move on. Okay, so that's a little bit about contract for deed. Let's move on to our next option. Now this is just a mortgage wrap, or wrapping a mortgage, and the process of that is it's fairly straightforward, although it sounds complicated. I think people get hung up on the insurance portion of this, but a mortgage wrap is nothing more than creating a new mortgage that encompasses the old mortgage. So it's wrapping the old mortgage like a blanket. It's wrapping it in its own terms. And here's the way that we're going to do that. Let me make sure here's the way we're going to do that. Just like any other mortgage that's created, right? There is going to be a terms portion of that deal, and then there's going to be security on those terms on every single mortgage. All right. So the terms portion of the deal is a promissory note. And that doesn't matter. I mean, like I said, it's on any mortgage that's written. There's going to be a promissory note, and there's going to be either a deed of trust or a recorded mortgage. All right. This process is going to convey legal title and equitable title. So you're going to own this property, or your buyer, if you're selling this on a mortgage wrap, is going to own this property legally. All right. So first step is you're going to get a promissory note with the terms on the loan that you're giving your buyer. You're giving your buyer a loan here. You're creating a debt. And so the terms of that loan, the terms of that debt go in the promissory note. Secondly, your buyer is going to give you a deed of trust or a mortgage, depending on what state. If you're a mortgage state, they're going to give you a mortgage. We're in Missouri, and we use deeds of trust in this state. The only difference here with this particular security instrument, meaning the deed of trust or the mortgage, The only difference is going to be that this is what they call an all inclusive either trust deed or mortgage. It's going to be all inclusive, and what that means is that I'm just going to use deed of trust in because we use deeds of trust in our state. That's what I'm going to refer to. But just understand that you can do this in a mortgage state as well. All this means, excuse me, when I say all inclusive, all it means is that the deed of trust is going to it's going to outline any specific existing liens that are on the property. So that would mean if you're doing a mortgage wrap, there's going to be another lien on the property, which is that underlying mortgage. And that underlying mortgage is going to stay in a senior position. All right. So this new note and this new mortgage that you're creating is going to be a junior mortgage. All right. So when you do a mortgage wrap, the mortgage that you create is junior to the already underlying mortgage that's in place. All right. This is very common, by the way. This happens all the time. But so the deed of trust is going to outline any existing liens, but it's also at the same time, it's going to secure the promissory note with the seller. If you're the seller, you're going to be getting a promissory note. You're going to get a deed of trust or a mortgage, right? And like I say, that security instrument is going to outline any existing liens. Period. Not just mortgages. If there's any liens that is being, if there are any liens on it, it's just this is your disclosure to your buyer of any liens that might be underlying, right? Okay, so that is essentially, in a nutshell, that is how the mortgage wrap is going to work. It's very simple. There's not. People get, I think people get hung up on it, but it's a very, very simple, very simple process, very simple way to convey title. Is there anything else that I need to talk about on that? Anybody have any questions on the wrap? Yes. Okay. You were talking about notes. Okay. All right, Jonathan. Yeah. I mean, we're not big note investors, to be honest with you. I'm really just starting to get into some of the aspects of notes. And I mean, I'm fascinated by it. And in fact, we had our blueprint weekend was last weekend. And we had the guys over at Creative Dealmaker on our blueprint presenting in our presentation, and I am blown away by that concept. It's definitely a chat for another. In fact, we may end up having Nick or Eric come on here with us one morning. But I'm fascinated by it. I don't do a lot of note investing. My partner at Sub2 Empire, Ken, has done some note investing, and I don't know if he's selling notes, but I know that he's bought some. So let's see what your other question is. I wonder if the relative could use their 401k to pay me for just partials on the property. Yeah. I wonder if the relative. I can't answer that question, Jonathan. I don't know. I would say that anything's possible. And yeah, I mean, as long as that 401k is self-directed, it might be a little, something that maybe I'm sure there's a custodian out there that understands that stuff. I'm positive of that, but I don't know actually on the 401k. I don't know what actually would qualify. I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but I'm not 100% sure. Who would I refer you out to? We use Quest for a lot of the 401k stuff. So that might be a question that needs to be directed to someone at Quest, or maybe they have some literature on their website out there about that. Scott said, the reason I was considering buying on a wrap from sellers who still have a larger note balance. that I don't want to have to bring to the table. I'm trying to learn how to explain this to my seller. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Totally understand it. Um, yeah, I think like I said, this gets misunderstood, and people think it's like some big hairy ordeal, but it's really not. It's really not. Um, so for you, we're going to switch gears now. For you, Scott, since you're the buyer on a mortgage wrap, um, the way that that all include, I call it an all inclusive trustee, but you can go out there and search. There actually are states that actually have something called an all inclusive trustee, but I'm referring more to a concept. It's an all inclusive trust deed, right? Where and the all inclusive part is just, it is your disclosure and your notification to your to the parties that there is underlying debt. That's all that it is. All right, and so yeah, we actually have the same type of provision in our contract for deed, which is something you might, if it gets too complicated, it sounds too complicated for your seller. If they get, if they're fearful of this, one of the tools you have is you can buy on contract for deed as well. So you have that at your disposal, and that's really going to protect your seller. It's not going to protect you near as much as a mortgage wrap would, but you can still get into the property, cash flow the property, and build equity in that property. So Jonathan says, regarding your wrap example, there was no sub-to agreement before, correct? Also, it was not a mirror wrap, correct? Correct. Yeah. So, well, actually, in Scott's case, this would be, if you're doing a mortgage wrap, you're not doing subject to, unless you're selling. If you have a property that you've purchased subject to. So I think, I want to continue to focus on the dispo side. So you would be correct. I mean, they're definitely, you can do it on a subject to deal. If you buy a property subject to, you can turn around and sell on mortgage wrap all day long. Very common. It also was not a mirror wrap, and I'm assuming you're talking about mirroring the underlying terms, right? I think that's what you mean by that. I'll come back to you if you want to answer that question, because I think that's I'm pretty sure that's what you mean by mirror wrap. All right, so where are we at here? Let me go back to my bullet points. Okay. Now, in terms of either if you are selling on contract for deed, or if you're selling on a mortgage wrap, a lot of people don't do this, and a lot of people don't know if it's available. But you may want to provide what's called an estoppel letter. It's an estoppel certification to your buyer, and really, what this involves is this is just more disclosure. That's what it is. So if you're buying on a mortgage wrap, you're going to want an estoppel certification from your seller. And likewise, on the dispo side, you may want to offer this, especially if you're dealing with condos or homeowners associations. It's going to be a big deal. If you're selling a property on a mortgage wrap that's in an HOA, that has an HOA, or especially a condo. Condos that are like, condos can be super, super, they can be, they're like Nazis. I mean, condos, you got to be extra careful with condos. But there's a few different situations where you might use an estoppel agreement. So let's go through a few of them. One of them is in a condo or homeowners association, like I just said. And an estoppel in this situation, what it's going to do, it's going to certify that the seller is current on any dues or any assessments, and it's also going to notify them of any future assessments. So this is, like I said, this is just disclosure is all this is. You're certifying from the condo or the homeowners association that the current owner, your seller, if you're buying, or you, if you are the seller, that you're current on any dues or assessments. All right. And it's also going to certify that um, that your buyer, it's going to notify them, rather, it's going to notify your buyer of any future assessments or dues. All right. So that's how you're going to apply it in a condo homeowners association. With if you're, let's say you're buying a property that has tenants in place, an estoppel in that case is going to be used to certify the terms of the lease. That means like the rent amounts, any amendments to the lease, or any particularly what's really nice about an estoppel is it actually, because a lot of times landlords and tenants, they have these verbal agreements or oral agreements. An estoppel is going to disclose any oral or verbal agreements. Maybe kind of, I don't know, maybe the landlord and tenant have come to a verbal agreement on who cuts the grass or something like that. That's the type of stuff that you're going to find in an estoppel when you're dealing with a rental property. In our case, we're looking at in a seller finance situation. Let's make sure. Okay. Yep, I got you. So you were talking about a mirror wrap. You were talking about mirroring the underlying. Got you on that. Okay. All right. So in a seller finance situation, an estoppel is going to obligate the seller, which, if you're disposing this property as you, it's going to obligate you to notify your buyer of any prior indebtedness on that property. So if there is debt on the property in any form, if you've used it for collateral for something, if you have an underlying note on it, any prior indebtedness prior to the closing, an estoppel is going to obligate you to notify your buyer of that. All right. And that's, again, that's just more disclosure. That's just letting them know that, hey, they're fully aware that there is an underlying note. And, if they want to move forward with the deal, then obviously they're taking that risk that there is underlying debt on it. It's also going to certify that you've been making all the required payments on that underlying note, and that you continue to do so. So it's going to certify that you've been making all required payments, and also this is going to prevent them from having to bring current any past due payments. All right, so it's, again, more disclosure, more transparency, and this can only benefit you in the long run, right? It's sort of like the Surgeon General putting on cigarettes that they know that cigarettes cause cancer. This is what you are. This is what you're disclosing. You're disclosing that you have this debt on this property, and if your buyer wants to continue to move forward, then they're taking on that risk as well. They need to understand that. And then again, this is going to certify that you're going to continue making payments on that underlying paper, and that you will not further encumber the property, either through a refi, although you can add exceptions. So let's say that, for example, let's say that you pick up a property subject to, you're selling it on a mortgage wrap, but maybe you don't like the terms, or maybe the terms later down the road get better. Maybe interest rates come down, and you want to refi that underlying debt. This is where you're going to let them know that. This is where you're going to disclose that. But you can never put more debt on the property than what you have when you sell it on a mortgage wrap. All right. So, and you also can't use the property for collateral in any way. That's what the estoppel is going to allow for. All right. Now, we did talk. Does anybody have any questions on estoppels, or I know it's very, very brief, but you can get super, super specific with these things. And so, um, that's an estoppel. If you're going to write an estoppel, I would definitely suggest that, or if you're taking on a property and would like to request an estoppel, then I would definitely talk to an attorney on that, because there are specifics that need to be addressed, and it's not a one size fits all type of situation. You know. All right. Any more questions on estoppels? All right. Finally, a this one is this one is really kind of specific. I've talked about this before, but we learned this by doing some deals down in Houston, and it's a really, really interesting dispo strategy when you're selling on seller finance. And honestly, I am really, really giving this more thought, and I'm giving it more thought into bringing it into my business as well, because it was just so clean and so much easier to do, and involves using, of course, trust. And that is this strategy is selling beneficial ownership on terms. That's all that this is. It's relatively simple. So think of a mortgage wrap. You're creating a promissory note. You're selling on terms. This is no different. This is absolutely the same process. You are getting if you're selling beneficial ownership in a trust, you're going to take a note for that sale. You're taking on a note. Um, your buyer is going to give you a note. The cool thing is that the note is on personal property. It's not on real estate, because beneficial ownership is considered personal property. And so, again, I'm just going to kind of rewind and go back to what we talked about. I think it was last week or maybe the week before that. But you might ask yourself, well, what is the security on my note that I'm taking for this beneficial ownership? And the security on that is going to be what's called a UCC1 filing. All 50 states have on the Secretary of State's. I don't know if it's on the Secretary of State's website on all 50 states, but I know that all 50 states have this available to you. And that is a UCC1 filing. A UCC1 filing is going to, what it does is it secures personal property. So if you sell personal property, in this case, beneficial ownership, in a trust, you cannot secure that through a recorded deed of trust or a mortgage, because it's not real property. You can only secure that through a UCC1 filing with the Secretary of State in your state. And the terms really, all they're going to look like is, it's very simple. It's going to be, it's actually, the promissory note's going to look much cleaner than it would if we're talking about real property, because all you're doing is you are outlining the terms of the sale of personal property versus real estate. You don't have any kind of, you don't have to go out and look up, legal descriptions and none of that stuff. The really cool thing about it, the major benefit to doing this, is that once that property is deeded into that trust as an asset, there's no more. The trust is going to be the one that gets insured for hazard insurance, liability, all that good stuff. So the trust itself is going to have the insurance policy. The trust is also going to have the title insurance policy if you buy in a trust. Okay, if you close on a property and you buy it directly in the trust itself is going to have a title policy. Now, if you transfer from, say, your personal name or from an LLC into the trust, that title policy no longer applies. All right, so So if you're purely buying in a trust and you get a title policy on that trust gets a title policy, that title policy is also going to stay in place. So now you've got title taken care of, you've got insurance taken care of, you've got taxes taken care of. Everything is taken care of because the trust owns the property. Now all you're doing is you are selling the beneficial ownership, the personal property inside that trust on terms. It's super, super clean, really easy. When you sell those beneficial interests, when you get that promissory note, you don't have to go through another title search. You don't have to go through this big elaborate closing, although it might make some people feel a whole lot better if you want to do that. And you can certainly do that. You can have a title company come in and you can come in and sign all your documents on the big mahogany desk and what have you. And just if that's what makes people feel better, then that's what I would do. But you don't have to. It's a very, very simple, clean process. And as I say, the only thing that's going to have to change is who the additionally insureds are on the insurance. Who is the actual? Because the named insured is going to be the trust, but the additionally insured, you're going to want, if you're buying a property this way, you're going to want to have your name as additionally insured. If you're selling a property if you're selling beneficial ownership, you're going to want to have your buyer is going to want to be an additionally insured on the policy. All right. Okay, we got anything? Let's see here. No questions, no comments. Awesome. So let's just recap here real quick. So again, this applies to whether you're buying or selling, doesn't really matter. But if you are selling, our preferred ways to convey title are the following. Contract for deed. Why is that? Because it's the least risky way for us to sell. We're only conveying equitable title. All right. Again, if your buyer defaults, well, then you may have to evict. Hopefully you can evict, but if they've built up enough equity in that property, you may have to foreclose. So be very careful about working in states where foreclosures take forever. That's going to be in judicial states. All right. Which, by the way, a non-judicial foreclosure can turn into a judicial foreclosure. So we're not all in the clear here. All right, but you definitely do not want to sell on seller financing, in my opinion, in a state where foreclosures can take a long time to foreclose. All right. So we have our contract for deed. The next we have our mortgage wrap. This is our second. If we're going to sell a property and your buyer does not like the idea of contract for deed because they don't get legal title or something, if that's their excuse, you can offer to sell it on a mortgage wrap. They are going to get legal title. You will definitely have to foreclose in this situation. You do not have the option to evict. All right. And this is a really simple process, despite it being kind of this, I don't know, I feel like this is like some kind of, it's viewed as some kind of magical, like this mystical process that people don't understand, but it's really quite simple. It's really just creating a promissory note and creating a new deed of trust or mortgage, that, with the only exception that this is an all-inclusive. It's going to wrap the underlying paper. All right, so that your mortgage wrap is going to be junior to the paper that it's wrapping. All right, so there's that. And then we talked about estoppels, and it's probably a good idea. It's something I don't think that everybody really puts into practice, and it's probably a really good idea because what it does is it's going to provide full disclosure and transparency, whether you're buying or selling. So estoppels are a great idea to have. And again, we've definitely done deals without estoppels, and we've sold many properties on seller financing without providing estoppel certifications. But it would be a good idea to do. It's a good practice, and maybe it's something we need to actually reevaluate in our own business and just make it kind of standard practice. And then, lastly, we talked a little bit about selling beneficial ownership in a trust. I am definitely going to dig into this a little bit deeper in my own business as well, because the experience that we had in Texas, and the reason we did it in Texas, and I'm not picking on Texas, but I'm pointing to Texas. But the reason that we did it was because it's, first of all, you can't sell in contract for deed in Texas. And I'm told by people in Texas that you can. It's just they make it very difficult. And so, and lease options are the same way. You can do lease options in Texas, but they make it very difficult to comply with it. So the cleanest way that we found to do that was through this strategy where we're selling beneficial ownership, and worked out really well. I mean, talking about a quarter of the headache of dealing with these other ways of conveying title. And again, I don't like to say conveying title, because we're not conveying title. We're conveying or we're selling on terms our beneficial ownership. So, all right. Jonathan says, so in your scenario, if you buy it from John Smith and you create a trust with beneficiaries, is everything the same as you explained? See, and this is the reason why I think we need to move to this kind of this live thing, because I'm not really picking up. I'm not really picking up what you're saying here, Jonathan. Let's see. So if your scenario, if you buy it from John Smith and you create a trust with beneficiaries, is everything the same as you explain? Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how. The only difference, Jonathan, is going to be that if you, let's say you buy it, let's say Jonathan goes out and buys a property, subject to, or doesn't matter what the financing is. If you buy it and you get the title policy on that for that property, and you convey that, and then you turn around and transfer that property into a trust, that title policy is no longer valid. So I think that's what you're trying to ask. But again, this is a reason why I think we just need to go live, and because it's really hard to. And someone like you, you're a little more advanced, so you know what you want to say, but I'm not. It may not be coming through crystal clear to me. So I think that's what you mean. But yes, you will not. If you will have to get another title policy for that trust. If you do, you close on it in one name and then you transfer the property into the trust, you will have to get a new policy for that trust. So you would have to go through a whole new closing, which is not a big deal. It's just more added expense, more time. None of that's a really big deal. And then Scott says, could you add a deed in lieu of foreclosure in all of these dispo scenarios? Yep. So that is a very good question, and the answer is, well, it just depends. There's no. So essentially, what you can do with a contract for deed, there is, in fact, in our contract for deed, it's actually we have provisions in that contract for quit claiming interest in a property. So if someone defaults in our contract, if somebody defaults on their payments, they automatically quit claim their interest. It's part of the contract. It's built into the contract. So on contract for deed, that's something I would recommend, that if you're going to do that, anyone else on the call, if you're going to do that, I would recommend that you definitely have that type of language in your contract for deed. And yeah, it's basically, like I said, it's basically just quit claim. If they stop making payments, if they default, they grant us um, the ability to file a quit claim on their behalf with the county. All right. If we're talking about a mortgage wrap, you could definitely do that. The way that works is so it gets a little bit hairier with a mortgage wrap, because generally speaking, with if especially well, whether you have a mortgage or a deed of trust, whether you're in either one of those two types of states, there is always going to be a trustee who kind of like in a in a living trust. There's always going to be a trustee in that deed of trust, a named trustee. And so, what you can do is you can actually have the trustee hold on to that deed in lieu. And if you default on that loan, that trustee would then be authorized to go out and go ahead and file that deed in lieu. All right. On the other side of the coin, if your buyer defaults, you would have the same luxury. Now, um, the one thing I want to say about the mortgage, I'm sorry, the mortgage wrap dispo, is that mortgage does not have to be recorded. Not all mortgages have to be recorded, contrary to popular belief. In fact, when we lend on these smaller deals, we take a second position. A lot of times we just don't record them. We get all the paperwork completed, um, and it's only recorded if our borrower happens to default. And so that deed in lieu, kind of along the same lines, the deed in lieu can be signed in advance, well in advance, and then it's just held onto by the trustee that's named in the deed of trust. Does that make sense? I hope that answers your question. And a deed in lieu is definitely recognized. Now, I can't say with total definitiveness that that is what's used in all states, but there is some form of deed in lieu in every state, um, and it's recorded. I mean, you can go out and find recordings that are literally deed in lieu all over the country. They're everywhere. Why not add to your standard business practice? You could. It's your business. So if you wanted to record a deed in lieu, um, if you wanted to offer mortgage wraps to your buyers, you could definitely do that, and that's totally fine. I mean, you're still going to have some folks that are. I mean, still going to have some lengthy, probably some lengthy lawsuits, because folks are losing money. When you have to foreclose on someone, you're going to have people that contest it, and they're going to want to drag it out. So, but you could definitely do that. It doesn't mean really. I mean, really, um, if you recorded that deed in lieu, well, really now you've just got theoretically, now you just have a uh, not a rent in possession. What's the other one? Unlawful detainer uh, suit on your hands. Now you're going to have to go through that process. So, but yeah, you could totally do that. In fact, I mean, I think it would be a great idea if you're going to. I prefer to sell on contract for deed, where we already have all of that taken care of inside the contract. But if you want to sell on a mortgage wrap, I would definitely consider making a deed in lieu and having the trustee hold on to it for a while. I would make that standard practice for sure. I just don't like to sell on mortgage wraps. That's all. So, all right, we got anything else? Anyone? Let's see. Let's make sure. Let's make sure that we have. You got it, Scott. All right, guys. Well, I guess that's it. I hope this was one of those ones that I considered talking about this for a while, but sometimes if we've got new folks on, I mean, sometimes this stuff can get a little kind of drone on. Yeah, that is true. There is that. There is so Jonathan says deed in lieu is not always a great idea because well, deed in lieu is fine as long as it's not something that is like kind of what we're talking about where it's held in trust. Um, Sometimes it can definitely be contested, overturned, all that good stuff. So yeah, I mean, you're just gonna. This is another reason why we just love contract for deed so much. I mean, it's just and again, it might make sense for you to talk to your seller, and because I know that you're looking at buying this property, might make sense to talk to your seller and just say, hey, if you're not comfortable with um, with me taking title on a mortgage wrap, I would still consider buying it on contract for deed. It's not. I mean, it's a little bit riskier for you, but honestly, if you're buying on seller financing anyway, if for some reason if some reason that you did default, I mean, she gets to take the property back. There's no, I mean, not saying you would be in the clear, but it is a lot safer for her to sell it. And really, what's the point here? We're all looking for that cash flow. So, um, it's not the ideal situation, but if you can still cash flow that sucker, then what the heck, you might as well do it, right? So, all right. Anything else? All right, folks. Wow, that went way longer than it's amazing. I get in here and I start running my mouth, and the time just flies. That's when you like what you do, I guess. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me. I will catch you next week. Um, Again, I would love to hear. If you've got some comments about this, I'd love to see them in the chat, or I'm sorry, in the comment section. Love to know, number one, are these good times? And number two, would you guys like to switch to a little more interactive type of format? Love to hear about it. Otherwise, I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my Sunday. And you folks do the same. All right. Take care. Talk to you later.